Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Now, we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 12th of January 2019, and the news that would be covered today is given on the screen, and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And so, now with this, let us start with the first article. Now, we have taken this lead editorial from the editorial page on page 6. Now, what the author does in this article is that the author compares the pre-independence anti-caste movement such as the Mahad Satyagraha, the Vaikom Satyagraha, and other forms of anti-caste movement that existed before India's independence. And what the author does is compare them with the Sabrimala movement. Now you should see this article from the perspective of GS Paper 1 within the section History and Society, and within the subsection Salient Features of Indian Society and Social Empowerment, whereby under this article we'll first understand as to what are the pre-independence anti-caste movement that the author talks about. And after that, we'll try to understand on how the author compares the pre-independence anti-caste movement with the Sabrimala movement. So now let us understand the first aspect from this article. Now the first pre-independence anti-caste agitation that the author talks about is of the Vaikom Satyagraha, whereby the Vaikom Satyagraha began in 1924 and was led by K. Madhavan and K.P. Kesava Menon. And this movement began in Vaikom, which was located in the princely state of Travancore, which is currently now called the state of Kerala, whereby the Vaikom Satyagraha intended to ensure that the oppressed castes such as the Izavas and the Pulyas were allowed to worship at the Shiva temple which was located in Vaikom. And after this, Babasaheb Ambedkar started the Mahad Satyagraha in 1927, whereby there was a water tank which was located on the Chowdar Chowk in the city of Mahad, which is located in current state of Maharashtra. And people from the Mahar community were denied access to the water which was located within the Chowdar tank. And therefore Babasaheb Ambedkar led to a non-violent satyagraha, which was known as the Mahad Satyagraha, and asserted for the right of the Mahar community to access water from the Chowdar tank located in the city of Mahad, whereby this movement symbolized the mass drinking of water from the Chowdar tank as an act of civil disobedience. Apart from this, Babasaheb Ambedkar also led to the temple entry satyagraha at the Parvati temple in Pune in 1929 and the Kalaram temple in Nasik from 1930 to 1934. And these are the three main pre-independence anti-caste agitations which the author is talking about in the article, whereby the author is referring to two different types of anti-caste agitations, whereby the Vaikom Satyagraha was a temple entry agitation, while the Mahad Satyagraha led by Babasaheb Ambedkar in 1927 intended for the oppressed caste access to community goods, such as local drinking water. However, what the author is highlighting with regards to pre-independence anti-caste movements is that in 1935, Babasaheb Ambedkar abandoned the earlier objectives of reform of Hinduism, and instead Babasaheb Ambedkar decided to embrace Buddhism. And therefore, it is within these contexts that the author is trying to compare the pre-independence anti-caste movements to the Sabrimala movement. Now, what the author is saying is that the Sabrimala movement is not like the Mahad movement which was led by Babasaheb Ambedkar in 1927, whereby the Sabrimala movement was for the empowerment of women to enter into the Sabrimala temple, while the Mahad movement was for the social empowerment of the Mahar community to access the community drinking water. But just because both of these movements were for social empowerment, it does not mean that both the movements were similar. Now, the first reason given by the author as to why the Sabrimala movement is different from the pre-independence anti-caste movements is because the Sabrimala movement have the authority of Article 14 of the Constitution of India. And apart from this, the Sabrimala movement is also backed by the verdict of the Supreme Court, which allows females of any age to have the right to worship at the Sabrimala shrine. However, according to the author, this was not the case with pre-independence anti-caste movements, whereby the Mahad Satyagraha or the Vaikom Satyagraha or any other anti-caste agitations which were undertaken before independence did not have the backing of either the British government or of the existing judicial structure that existed before India's independence. Apart from this, the second reason given by the author is that the women who are agitating for temple entry within the Sabrimala temple cannot undertake religious conversion, which was a step taken by Babasaheb Ambedkar in 1935. And the reason, according to the author, is that why the women cannot undertake religious conversion is because of the patriarchal structure of the caste system. Now, according to the author, Babasaheb Ambedkar had embraced Buddhism and left Hinduism as he did not want to be part of any form of discriminatory religious system, such as the caste system which existed in Hinduism. However, what the author is trying to highlight is that the women who are agitating for temple entry at the Sabrimala temple cannot undertake the decision taken by Babasaheb Ambedkar for religious conversion because of the patriarchal structure of the caste system. Now, what the author is trying to highlight in this is that the caste is given by the male member of the family, whereby the woman carries the caste of her own father, and after the marriage of the woman, the caste of the woman also changes to that of her husband. And therefore, what the author is trying to highlight is that the caste system is patriarchal in nature, whereby it depends upon the caste of the male member of the society, whereby the children themselves also carry forward the caste of the husband. However, you have to understand that this is a simplified understanding of the patriarchal structure of the caste system. But hopefully, you understand as to why the author is claiming that the woman cannot undertake religious conversion, since if the woman also changes her religion, then she has to make sure that her husband and her children also convert to the new religion, which, according to the author, is not possible since it would be the decision of the husband whether he wants to leave the discriminatory caste system and embrace a new religion. And because of the patriarchal structure within the Indian society, the women themselves would not have this authority. And therefore, what the author is recommending is that Hinduism as a faith is inherently diverse, continuously evolving, and with strong themes of self criticism, self correction, and self improvement. And all of these aspects are reflected in the temple entry movement, which was undertaken for the Sabrimala temple. Now, you also have to understand that this is a generalized conclusion, whereby the main crux of this is that the Sabrimala movement reflect the usage of the fundamental rights which were given in the Indian constitution and the authority of the judiciary to undertake reform of the discriminatory practices that exist in Hinduism, such as denial of rights to oppressed caste and to women. And since these steps of taking the help of the Indian constitution and of the Indian judiciary did not exist in pre-independence anti-caste movements, it makes the Sabrimala movement different from the pre-independence anti-caste agitations. Now, a question for your practice is which of the following statements on movements against caste discrimination correct? And what you need to do is pause this video, solve this question, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now, the correct answer to this question is C, both 1 and 2, whereby the Vaikom Satyagraha was an agitation for temple re-entry for oppressed caste, while the Mahad Satyagraha was led by Babasaheb Ambedkar in 1927 for access to community drinking water from the Chowdhury tank. And therefore, the correct answer is both 1 and 2. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, we have taken this article from page 11. Now, what this article highlights is that the Government of India is going to introduce the vote on account on 1st of February 2019. Now, it has been assumed that the Government of India can announce various new schemes and amend the Income Tax Act through the vote on account. And this has raised concerns because the government generally does not announce any new schemes or amend the tax laws while giving the vote on account. Now, what you need to understand from this article is first, what is a vote on account? The second aspect that you need to understand is how is the vote on account different from the interim budget? And after understanding as to what is the vote on account and what is the interim budget, we'll again understand as to what this article talks about. Now, vote on account is provided under Article 116 of the Constitution of India. Now, as per convention, what happens in an election year? The government which is in power does not present a full-fledged union budget. And therefore, what the government in power does in an election year is that it provides for a vote on account. Now, this vote on account is presented to the parliament and an approval is obtained from the Lok Sabha so as to draw money from the Consolidated Fund of India so as to meet their expenditure for a given period of time. It is only the Lok Sabha which has the deciding power to grant money for expenditure under the vote on account. Now, one difference between vote on account and the interim budget or a full budget is that a vote on account only contains for expenditure and does not contain any form of provision for income. Now, what this means is that the government, when presenting the vote on account, can only ask the Lok Sabha that it needs this amount of money to spend on various forms of expenditure. However, the government cannot ask the Lok Sabha under the vote on account that it needs to impose any form of taxation that would either increase or decrease the income for the government through the vote on account. Now generally vote on account is taken for 2 months in a non-election year. However, in an election year, the vote on account can be taken for 3 to 4 months. So you have to understand that the time limit that is imposed on vote on account is based on convention rather than a strict rule. The last aspect about the vote on account that you should know is that it does not include the interim budget, but the interim budget can include the vote on account. And since the vote on account doesn't include the interim budget, generally the government does not announce any form of new policies, schemes, or any new forms of tax proposals under the vote on account. So now these are the main features of the vote on account, whereby vote on account is provided under Article 116 of the Indian Constitution, whereby the vote on account is undertaken to meet expenditure of the government for a specific periods of months, such as during an election year. And one important aspect that you need to know about the vote on account is that only the Lok Sabha is empowered to grant for expenditure from the Consolidated Fund of India under the vote on account. And apart from this, the vote on account only presents the demand for expenditure and not for the revenue side, whereby it is the interim budget which deals both with revenue and with expenditure. And this is one of the major differences between the vote on account and the interim budget. Another important aspect that you should know is that the expenditure demand made under the vote on account is generally given for 2 months in a non-election year, but it can be extended to 3 to 4 months in an election year. However, you have to understand that this is based on a convention and is not a specified rule or a law. And the last main aspect about the vote on account that you should know is that it does not include the interim budget, whereby the government doesn't announce any form of major policy changes and tax proposals under the vote on account. Whereby you should understand that the government cannot announce any major policy changes based on parliamentary convention, whereby it cannot announce any form of tax proposal based on the rule given under Article 116, whereby the vote on account only presents demand for expenditure and not for revenue. And the last aspect that you should know as a difference between the vote on account and the interim budget is that the vote on account doesn't include the interim budget, but the interim budget can include the vote on account. So now hopefully you've understood as to what is a vote on account and how is it different from an interim budget. Now what this article talks about is that during an election year, the government in power generally does not announce any form of new policy schemes. However, what the article has also highlighted is that during 2014-15, the UPA 2 government also announced the one rank one person during the vote on account. And similarly, past governments have also taken major policy decisions when presenting the vote on account. And thereby there is also a chance that the current government may also announce major policy changes when it presents the vote on account. Apart from this, the article also highlights is that the current government may also bring in changes to the Income Tax Act. However, you have to understand that these changes within the Income Tax Act would not be brought in during the vote on account. And what would happen is that the current government would bring a bill within the Parliament of India which would seek to amend the Income Tax Act. And this bill then would be passed by the Parliament of India. And therefore, the vote on account and the bill to be introduced to bring in any changes to the Income Tax Act would be two different aspects being undertaken by the government within the parliament. But what the article is trying to highlight is that both of these aspects, whereby major policy decisions and any changes within the Income Tax Act would be brought in during the budget session, in which the Government of India would be presenting the vote on account. But you have to understand that this news is currently in transition, so we'll have to wait and watch for 1st of February 2019 when the Government of India introduces the vote on account within the Parliament of India. And we'll have to see as to whether the government brings in any major policy changes or introduces any form of bill to amend the Income Tax Act. But hopefully from this article you have understood as to what is vote on account. Now a question for your practice is what is the difference between vote on account and interim budget? And this question has been taken from the prelims of 2011. Whereby what you need to do is pause this video, solve this question and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is B, 2 only, whereby the provision of a vote on account is generally used by a caretaker government. While as you already understand, a vote on account only deals with the expenditure, while an interim budget includes both expenditure and revenue. And therefore the correct answer is B, 2 only. And therefore now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 5. Now what is happening is that ISRO is working on a new technology where it will use the last stage of the PSLV rocket for space-based experiments, whereby ISRO would be performing a technology demonstration when it launches the PSLV C-44 rocket in January of 2019, whereby this PSLV rocket is known as PSLV-DL. And whereby what is going to happen is that during the first stage, the PSLV rocket would be launched, which would contain the primary satellite known as Microsat-R, which is a form of a microsatellite. And what would happen during this PSLV C-44 mission is that the three stages of rocket which are part of PSLV would be used and then fall off and burn in the Earth's atmosphere. And what used to happen earlier is that when the rocket would leave the Earth's atmosphere, the last stage of the rocket would then fall back into the Earth's atmosphere and thereby would become a space debris. But what ISRO is intending to do now is to keep this last stage of the rocket alive, whereby what ISRO would do is provide this last stage of rocket with lithium-ion batteries. And also within the future, ISRO would also provide this last stage of the rocket with solar panels, whereby what both of these aspects would provide is that this last stage of the rocket can be used as a makeshift satellite. And whereby this stage 4 rocket, which would be used as a makeshift satellite, can then be used to conduct space-based experiments. However, you have to understand that during the C-44 mission, which is being undertaken in January of 2019, it would only be provided with lithium-ion batteries, and it would be in future space projects that the solar panels would be provided in the last stage of the PSLV rocket. And that is why PSLV C-44 mission is expected to perform a technology demonstration, whereby it would showcase the usage of lithium-ion batteries in the last stage of the PSLV rocket. And so hopefully you've understood that in a normal scenario, the initial stages of the PSLV fall back into the sea, while during the stage 4, above the Earth's atmosphere, the payload is released into the space. However, what is going to happen now is that the stage 4 will be used as an orbital platform, whereby it would be provided with lithium-ion batteries and solar panels so as to function as a makeshift satellite, whereby it can then be used for space-based experiments. And apart from this, the usage of the payload as a makeshift satellite would also reduce space debris. Now this technology of using stage 4 of the PSLV rocket as an orbital platform is being tested through the PSLV C-44 mission, which is being undertaken in January of 2019. However, in this PSLV C-44 mission, the last stage of the rocket or stage 4 will be equipped with only lithium-ion batteries, and it would be in future missions that the last stage of the PSLV rocket would include solar panels. And this variant of the PSLV which uses this technology is known as PSLV-DL. Now question for your practice is which of the following statements about PSLV are correct? And what you need to do is pause this video, solve this question and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is D, 1, 2 and 3. Wherein PSLV is the first generation of Indian launch vehicles to be equipped with liquid stages, whereby PSLV is the third generation of Indian launch vehicles, but it is the first generation to be equipped with liquid stages. The fourth stage, which is called PS4, does comprise of liquid engines, and it is also responsible for the correct injection of PSLV payload into their desired orbit. And since this PSLV C-44 mission and the PSLV-DL variant generally focus upon the fourth stage or the PS4, then both point 2 and 3 become relevant, especially with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. And therefore now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 18. Now what this article talks about is that artificial intelligence is being used to detect early stages of cervical cancer. And this is being done through an artificial intelligence technique called automated visual evaluation. Now what is happening is that an algorithm has been formed under which more than 60,000 photographs of cervical cancer have been saved as being a database. And through the use of these 60,000 images, a computer has been taught to look out for signs of cervical cancer. Whereby let's say a doctor uploads a picture which he considers has signs of showing cervical cancer. And what this artificial intelligence-based algorithm would do is take a look at this image and compare it with the 60,000 images which has been fed into its database, and thereby learn from these database as to whether this image contains sign of cervical cancer or not. And this process is known as automated visual evaluation, where a computer through artificial intelligence evaluates various visual representation such as photographs and checks these photographs for showing various signs of cervical cancer. And because it is being done by a computer, it is known as automated visual evaluation. And it has been said that this automated visual evaluation has a 91% accuracy, which is more than the accuracy of human experts. However, you have to understand that this automated visual evaluation for detecting early stages of cervical cancer is still under clinical trial. However, what the scientists have said that they are not going to patent this technology so that it keeps the cost low for this artificial intelligence technique that uses automated visual evaluation to detect early stages of cervical cancer. However, with regards to UPSC examination and with regards to having a general understanding, what you need to know is what is automated visual evaluation and should largely be seen from the perspective of GS Paper 3 within the section Technology. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 18. Now what this article talks about is that it is highlighting a recent study which has used new methods to track ocean warming. And what this study has shown is that the oceans are heating up at a faster rate. Now the reason the oceans are heating up at a faster rate is because of climate change, whereby 93% of the excess heat which is trapped around the earth by greenhouse gases is accumulated in the world's ocean. However, the main aspect that you need to understand from this article is about Argo, whereby Argo is a global array of around 3,800 freely drifting floats that measure the temperature salinity of the upper 2,000 meter of the oceans. And what this allows is for the continuous monitoring of the temperature, the salinity, and the velocity of the upper ocean, wherein the Indian partner in the international collaboration of Argo is the Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Services, which is an autonomous body under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Apart from this, what you should also understand is that the international headquarters of Argo is located in France. Whereby if you take a look at this map, in particular the Indian Ocean, then India, Australia and several other countries have provided various floats under the international Argo system. And all of the data which is collected from these various floats are then provided to the Argo-based satellites, whereby this data is then processed at the global data centers which are first located in France and the second one located in San Francisco in the United States. Whereby what happens is that every float which has been given out by every individual country, and therefore the robotic floats which have been given out by India would first send their data to India itself, and in particular to the Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Services. And then this Indian partner would upload the data to the global data center which are located in France and the United States. But hopefully you've understood the three main aspects that you need to understand about Argo, especially with regards to your upcoming UPSC prelims examination of 2019. First, as to what is Argo, what is the purpose of Argo, and what is the Indian partner in collaboration with Argo. While with regards to your UPSC examination, Argo would first be placed in your prelims examination within the section General Issues on Climate Change. And apart from this, it would also be placed in GS Paper 3 within your mains examination within the section Environment. Now, a question for your practice is consider the following statements. And as you already understand, pause this video, solve this question, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is D, 1, 2 and 3. Whereby as you already understand, ocean acts as Earth's main buffer against climate change because they accumulate the excess heat that is trapped from greenhouse gases. Now with regards to the second statement, you also have to understand that these robotic floats which work under Argo do spend most of their life drifting below the ocean surface. Whereby what generally happens is that these robotic floats generally go about 2,000 meters below the surface of the ocean, whereby they take various measures of temperature and salinity. And then what happens is that after 10 to 15 days, they come back again to the surface, transmit this data to a satellite, and again go back below the ocean surface to again take measurements. And therefore statement 2 is correct. And with regards to statement number 3, data from Indian floats are obtained at the Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Services, which is an autonomous body under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. whereby this organization is the Indian partner in Argo. Now if you take a look at this map, most of the floats that India has given under the Argo International Project are located within the Indian Ocean near the coastline of India. Apart from this, India has also released a number of robotic floats covering the country of Maldives, Seychelles, and other countries that lay on the eastern coast of Africa. So now hopefully you've also understood the deployment of robotic floats by India within the Indian Ocean. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 9. Now what this article talks about is that the Supreme Court Collegium has recommended two names to be appointed as judges to the Supreme Court. Now what you need to understand from this article is how are judges appointed to the Supreme Court. Whereby you should understand judges' appointment first from the perspective of your prelims examination within the section Indian Polity and within the subsection Constitution. And with regards to your mains examination, judges' appointment would form a part of GS paper 2 within the section Constitution and Polity. First within the subsection Structure, Organization and Functioning of the Judiciary, and also within the subsection Appointment to various constitutional posts. So now let us understand on how judges are appointed to the Supreme Court. Now judges of the High Court and Supreme Court are appointed by the President of India. However, the method and procedure of selection has not been clearly provided in the Constitution. So the process for selection, elevation and transfer of judges to higher judiciary has been a debatable issue due to the overlapping nature of the legislature, executive and the judiciary. Now to understand the complete procedure for the selection of judges, let us first understand about the three judges case. Now in the first judges case, which occurred in 1982 in the SP Gupta vs Union of India case, the Supreme Court held that the opinion of the Chief Justice of India and the Chief Justice of respective High Courts was merely consultative in nature, and therefore the power of selection resides solely and exclusively with the central government, wherein the central government could override the opinion given by the judges. But however, in the second judges case, which occurred in 1993 in the SC Advocates on Records Association vs Union of India case, the Supreme Court emphasized that the government does not enjoy primacy or absolute discretion in selection of Supreme Court judges. And similarly, in the third judges case, the ruling in the second judges case was further elaborated and articulated by another 9-judge bench, which is effectively known as the third judges case. And this case effectively laid down the principle of the collegium system. Now hopefully up till here you have understood that the judges of the High Court and Supreme Court are appointed by the President of India. But however, the method and procedure of selection of judges is not clearly provided in the Constitution. So in the first judges case, in 1982 in the SP Gupta vs Union of India case, the Supreme Court held that the opinion of the Chief Justice of India and the Chief Justice of the High Court is consultative in nature, and therefore the power of selection resides solely and exclusively with the central government, and the central government could override the opinion given by the judges, thereby effectively allowing executive to have primacy in the selection of judges. But in the second judges case, in the Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association vs Union of India case, the Supreme Court held that the government does not enjoy primacy or discretion in matters of selection of Supreme Court judges. And lastly, in the third judges case, the Supreme Court further elaborated and articulated upon the second judges case and effectively laid down the principles of the collegium system for the selection of judges. Now let us understand as to what is the collegium system. Now the collegium system is a forum of the Chief Justice of India and the 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court. And this forum recommends selection and transfer of judges. So the collegium system effectively brought the primacy of the judiciary or the judicial members in the selection of judges. But the Government of India passed the Constitution 121st Amendment Bill of 2014 to establish the National Judicial Appointment Commission. And this commission would effectively replace the collegium system. The Supreme Court of India declared the NJAC as unconstitutional. Now the Supreme Court declared the NJAC as unconstitutional because it observed that it was interference from the executive in judicial appointment. And thereby the Supreme Court, through this verdict, effectively revived the collegium system. Now hopefully up till here you have understood that the collegium system would consist of a forum of the Chief Justice of India and the 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court. And this collegium would recommend the selection and transfer of judges. However, the Government of India, in its 121st Amendment Bill of 2014, formed the National Judicial Appointment Commission, which would have effectively replaced the collegium system. But the Supreme Court declared the National Judicial Appointment Commission as unconstitutional because it observed that it was interference of the executive in judicial appointment and thereby reviving the collegium system. Now hopefully up till here you have understood the procedures and method of selection of judges. Now a question for your practice is consider the following statements, whereby the first statement is taken from the prelims of 2012, the second statement from the prelims of 2013, and the third statement from the prelims of 2014. And what you need to do, as you already understand, is pause this video, solve this question, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is D, 1, 2 and 3, whereby you already understand statement number 1 and statement number 2. And with regards to the statement number 3, the power to increase the number of judges in the Supreme Court is vested with the Parliament of India, whereby the original Constitution of 1950 envisioned the Supreme Court with a Chief Justice and 7 judges of the Supreme Court. And over the years, the number of judges to the Supreme Court have increased. And it was in 2008 that the current strength of 31 judges was provided by the Parliament, whereby it included 30 judges of the Supreme Court plus 1 Chief Justice of India. But you should also understand that the Parliament of India can also increase this number in the future. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 5. Now what you need to understand from this article is given in the first 2 paragraphs itself, wherein the Renuka Dam project is being undertaken by 5 states, which are Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Delhi and Himachal Pradesh. And this Renuka Dam project would be constructed on the Giri River, which is a tributary of the Yamuna River. And this Renuka Dam project would be located within Himachal Pradesh. And what the Renuka Multi-Purpose Dam project would do was provide water and power to the upper Yamuna region. Now these are the 3 main facts that you need to understand about the Renuka Multi-Purpose Dam project, especially with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. Whereby with regards to your prelims examination, it would first be placed in current events of national importance. And secondly, it would be seen as a current event of national importance within the aspect of Indian geography and within the aspect of economic geography of India. And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.